Okay, I'm going to start recording now. Effective of critical reading. So this is the world. So you're all in master's year. You've only got 1 year to complete all your coursework. So reading is a critical part of everything that you're doing. So your coursework, your assignments, your dissertation requires a lot of reading. Sometimes it's really difficult to know exactly what you're supposed to reading, what you're supposed to be reading, how you're supposed to read it, where you're supposed to get your reading from. So essentially you are researching, becoming more proficient in a specific topic, and you are engaging with other people in your field. So you're engaging with academic authors, with researchers, and specialists in your field. So in order to engage with the data that you're reading, you need specific skills. You need reading skills, you need note-taking skills. So the textbooks give you the basic understanding, while the journal articles you'll get from the GCU library under databases, etc., will provide you with in-depth coverage and the most recent up-to-date developments. So it's worth spending some time looking through the GCU library rather than on Google or Google Scholar, and then getting your content words, your search words organized, so you know exactly what you're looking for. So when you cross-examine all pieces of evidence, which are the authors, you can decide critically whether the argument is valid and relevant. Because just because you are doing something on environmental management or digital forensics or whatever, you might bring up 4,500 articles. They are not necessarily all relevant. So make sure you know exactly, play around with the key terms that you put into the discover bar of the GCU library. If you're looking at academic books in the library or online, use the chapter headings to find out whether that contains the information that you're looking for. Journal articles, most of research reports use databases to locate them. If you have any trouble with using the databases, there is a subject-specific librarian for the School of Engineering. So if you ever get into any bother with not knowing exactly what to look for, then engage the services of the librarian. So go into the GCU library website and you'll find it. It's under School Librarian. They're fantastic. You have official reports by government departments and international organisations. They collect all the data, and the databases list journal articles, conference papers. So the databases is under a separate section of the GCU library. So you'll be doing all these things. So you've moved up a level now. So at postgraduate level, the requirements are slightly more, require more critical thinking, more specialist research, and above all, you need to know exactly what you're looking for. So you need to assess the current knowledge and identify the gaps. You've got to find strategies for locating the information. You've got to be able to locate and access it, gather the information. So all this should be done before you start your writing. And then you review and compare and evaluate and organize it. So when you compare and evaluate your information, that is when you are retrieving specific articles on something that you are researching, and no two article is the same, no two person says the same thing, so you might be comparing them. You might be one author might be saying something in contrast to another author. Some may be simply expanding on it. Read widely, not too widely, because there's an awful lot of information out there, and you really don't need all of it, obviously. So you read to gain an understanding of the subject area. You have got a reading list for the module, and all the reading is on the GCU library. So all the reading you get from the GCU library is valid and current and authentic, whereby the reading you get from Google search isn't, nor is it if you use AI. So develop the strategies for doing your reading and be selective. So I will put this in the chat. This is another thing, because your reading won't stop here. I'm sure you'll be reading, if any of you continue on to do a PhD, you'll be continuing with your reading. Read widely. It's like being a judge at a trial. You cross-examine the arguments of the others, but remember the arguments are subjective. Now I'm going to actually, sorry, I disappeared for a minute. So here is a link to a Padlet. Okay, so Padlet's like an information storyboard that I really enjoy using. So get the link and click on it, open it up, and on it you will see it says week 4 academic reading, although this is week 5. Click on the article that says academic article and see if you can open it up. That's a report from the International Journal of Construction Management. I'm just showing you an example. It's called Applications of Multi-Rotor Drone Technologies in Construction Management. Okay, so that is something. So keep that open and we'll refer back to it. So when you're reading, you're cross-examining the arguments of others. So you're looking, what claims is the text making? Is it making a particular claim? So if you look on that article there, you'll see the abstract. You will see that the first sentence says multi-rotor drones are considered a new and innovative technology. Therefore, many fields are showing increasing interest in utilizing motor drone technologies, etc., etc. So that's making a claim, okay? And then you would go back and say, are these claims backed by evidence? Why is he saying that? Are there any deviations between this and other texts? What other text is saying the similar thing or saying it's a load of rubbish? What reasons have been given for the claim? So this is called critical reading. So if you keep these things at the back of your head, whatever piece of research you are carrying out, whatever subject you are investigating, whatever argument you're looking for reasons for, you look at the various articles and the various pieces of text, and if you keep these at the back of your head, that will help you form a critical overview, because they're not all the same. They're not just pieces of information. You need to be, as it says there, you need to be examining exactly what it says and seeing whether it's useful or not. So you evaluate what you have just read. What position is the writer presenting? Who's written the article? Let me go back to this one. Is it researchers at universities? Is it a pharmaceutical company? Is it a third sector, for example, a charity? Who is it? Is it a student writing a blog? Probably not. What evidence supports the writer's position? What evidence does he have? Is the author carrying out a study? Is the evidence accurate? How's he collected the evidence? How many people have been in the study? Is it 5 or is it 500? Are the claims justifiable? How does it compare to other writers, and do you agree with it? So when you are making your point, whatever area you are working in, you are making a point. You have your idea that you're putting forward. For example, the use of recycled paper in sandwiches or something. The use of recycled labels on clothing or aspects or buttons or zips on clothing is a marketing gimmick. Okay, if that was the point you were putting forward, then you would be looking for other materials in the library, other secondary sources that either justified your point or disagreed with it. Okay, so you're always making a point, and you're always looking for things which support your point or which refute it, i.e. Don't agree with it. And that's sometimes what can be a bit challenging. You want to have the confidence to say what you think, but what you think is supported by somebody else, and you'd say something like, this is supported by, or blah blah author in the field states that. So when you're reading a journal article, you're looking for the answers. Okay, so you need to have the questions, you need the text to answer. So when you are having your questions, the question is usually taken from your coursework brief, i.e. the coursework statement. And you've set yourself, and if you're doing a dissertation, you have a question to answer. Okay, and the authors are providing, or the sources are providing the answers to a question. So read the abstracts if you're able to look back, and I will put a link to the Padlet back into the chat, so anybody who's come in recently can have a look at it. So if you look on the first article, again, motor drone technology, you will see the abstract there, and you can just have a look at it and see whether that's, speed through it and see whether that's any useful. Scan the text for signs of relevance and to gain an understanding of the scope of the article. What parts might you need to read? So have a very quick look through the article. Read the first sentence of the article, which is a topic sentence. Consider the validity of the research. So skim through it and look at the tables and see the study there and see what's been carried out. Make a note of what you find in any questions the text raises. So you're gauging the reliability of the sources or authors. You're understanding the material. And so basically when you're looking through something, you are looking to see whether it's going to serve your purpose or not. So if you put in a search at the GCU library, you know that on the right hand side, the ribbon on the right hand side, you can click articles if you just want articles. If you don't click anything, it comes up with all the information. It comes up with books, ebooks, articles, etc., etc. So depending on what you want, you can narrow down your search by just ticking the articles box, and you can also tick down, you can also put the dates within parameters. So you might want something in the last 20 years as opposed to 80 years. So that will really help refine your search. And once you've gone that, you can play about with the content words. Is the author's position or interest made clear, or is it just an article written by a specific company, in which case it'll be biased towards that company? Is the language emotive? What kind of language is the author using, or is it just plainly stated facts? Is it clear when the information was produced? And that's the trouble with just gaining things from the internet. So be very careful when you just search on the internet and find something, because websites disappear, websites vanish, and it's not necessarily very accurate. And in addition to that, you're not really sure when the information was produced, and is information clearly communicated. So searching, identify the purpose and the audience, skimming through it. So you skim the main points, the introduction, conclusion to establish the position, and use the topic sentences to identify the argument. So if you go back to the Padlet, look on that article, and I think I've got mine open. Go back to the article and go to the first page, the first page of the introduction page. Sorry, the page after that. And the heading is called Research Design. So it's on page 3. And it's called Research Design. Research Design is the heading, so that's in report format. It starts off and it says there are 3 main procedures that have been carried out in this research project. So that's what that's about. The section will be talking about the 3 main procedures, and then it links it. First, existing uses of multi-rotor drones are classified and reviewed to comprehensively investigate, etc., etc. Second, so these are really good things to be looking out for. It's very clearly signposted. Firstly, secondly. So look for the content words and phrases. So if you're looking, depending on what your subject area is, and you will have certain phrases that you're looking for. And then if you have an article, you can use Control F. I'll put that in the chat. If there's a specific word that you're looking for, like, I don't know, environmental management, I mean, that's very simple. But if there's a specific word you're interested in, you're looking for, you put Control F into the document and it'll highlight everything that has that word. Okay, so there are voices. There are voices in the text. So this comes when you're reading something. I don't know how you will organize your reading, and I don't know how you make notes, but there's a lot to be said for just having lined paper beside you when you're making notes, because if you do everything online, things get lost, and it's really can quite often be difficult to organize it. So you could get a piece of your A4 lined paper or whatever, write it down, put the headings of the article that you're looking at, and then make notes on it, as long as you know that that piece of paper you have refers to the article you've got online. So when you're writing, you are the writer. So when you're discussing things, you're putting forward your ideas using your own voice. You're referring to other authors using their voice, and other voices are called the sources. So you could say author, I'll put an example here. So that is the author's voice. Author 2021 pointed out that, and he's going to form part of your argument. So when you're reading your academic articles, you need to make sure that whatever you're reading can help form your discussion. So these are the sources. So essentially when you're reading, you're engaging, as I said in the first slide, you're engaging in a debate with the other authors. So it's like a discussion. and because nobody says the same thing, and everybody has different viewpoints and different areas that they're specialized in, you are forming a debate with these authors. So you're using your voice as the writer, you're then integrating the author's voice. So that's what you're looking for with your reading. And if you see there, it says the direct voice is the exact words of the source, the indirect voice. Hole and Hole 1990 point out that the environmental implications of using plastic bags was such and such. This is supported by, and then you have a further author. Then you have the external voice summarize the idea and identify the source outside the sentence structure. So there are two ways. There are two ways, and particularly when you're reading it, so it'd be good to spot the two ways. That one is called author prominent. I'll make that a little bit bigger. There's the author there, Hole and Hole point out that. That's the author comes first. The one underneath is the information prominent. The information comes first. So you've got your summary, your paraphrase, and then you've got Hole and Hole 1990 in brackets. So there's two ways of doing it. So have a look when you're doing your reading, and when you're writing up what you're reading, you can vary the way that you're writing it up. And it's a really good way to do it because it varies it. So you think, why bother taking notes? Now, gone are the days, apparently, gone are the days when you read something on paper and then you underline the words and then you highlight it. And that has been proved to be not as effective as making notes and then paraphrasing what you're saying. So when the purpose of note taking is you're framing an overview. So you've got an overview of what you've read, and you're recording a sequence. You're comparing different viewpoints. So you might have, depending on what you're reading, you might have one author who says something on one half of a piece of paper. So look at what the author's actually saying. They're not just writing facts, they're saying something. Have another half piece of paper with another author who might be saying something differently, who might be agreeing with the first one. Understanding the meaning of the data. So if there's results table, then understand what that data means. Borrow quotes, however, use them sparingly. Quotes are only really used to back up something you can't really say yourself, or if it's really something mind-blowing, you can use the quote. Don't start off the introduction with a quote, and use it a shortish quote if you have to, if you're saying something that can't really be paraphrased, and then add your own commentary. This shows that, this demonstrates that this is important because, so think why you are noting. So as I mentioned, you are forming a discussion. You've got a dialogue with different authors. You're making notes, and I would really recommend not having too many, but making notes on a piece of paper so you know exactly, you can follow the sequence of what you're saying. So making notes either on a separate piece of paper or some other thing. You might use sticky notes, you might use another piece of A4, you might be making notes on the actual article that you're reading. So identify the purpose, what you're making notes for, decide on the most appropriate note-taking style. So you can either use bullet points or mind maps or any kind of diagrams. It depends what you feel comfortable with. It depends whether, if you're using paper, you might sometimes use the margin. So when I make notes, I usually make one bullet point there, then I've got lots of arrows going off it, all pertaining to the same topic or the same argument. Scan the section to be read, establish the purpose, work out their take and how it relates to your work. So remember that the author has a take on what he's saying. Now I'm just having a look at the article in the Padlet again. Yes, you'll get used to reading lots of different, well, I'm sure you are already reading lots of different articles and coming up with the viewpoint or the take of the author. And then ensure you paraphrase it in your own words. And then you either have the author prominent or you have the information prominent. So everything is paraphrased. And then when you are writing, you are integrating your own viewpoint without obviously saying I. You use the passive tense and then using the sources to back up what you're saying. So whatever you're trying to say, or whatever, you might have lots of different statements in your coursework that you are explaining or you're researching, or you're evaluating, you're critically evaluating something. So you're making your point, they're using the authors to come in and showing how that's backing up your point. So whenever you're reading something, make sure that it relates to what you're doing. And if it doesn't, then get rid of it and get something else. So we all read online resources, although the library's very good. So it's sometimes quite nice to go and look at something paper-based, and you can quite often skim through it just as effectively. So the trouble is that the web-based often divides into screen-sized chunks. So it's sometimes difficult to gain a picture, whereby if the article is fairly short, maybe it's 3 or 4 pages and it's printed out, it's a lot easier to get an idea about what the whole article is about, because on the screen it's divided into sections. If you're not used to reading extensively, or you don't like reading, or you find it difficult, particularly if you're used to reading something in a different language, and then maybe you're not used to reading so much text in English, it can sometimes be a bit challenging. So practice reading is what I've advised before. Get an article or something and set yourself a timer and say something like 7 minutes for a 4-page article, and then skim through it really quickly and see if you can not focus on the individual words, just float over the words, and and read in chunks. So that's like reading a couple of words in one chunk rather than reading individual words. Now, so when I read, so I can read a book in a couple of days, and the reason why I do that is because I just skim over it. So when I'm reading an article, I'll skim over it, and my eyes will be trained to pick out the most important points. If you're reading something and you don't really understand what it's saying, if the vocabulary is too complex, or it's vocabulary you're not really accustomed to reading, then don't use the article at all. Find another one, because if you use something that's too complicated, then you won't be able to paraphrase it effectively. So if you're reading something, beware of too many bullet points, as bullet points just lack detail and you don't get the author's voice coming through. Beware of bias towards material which is very easily accessible. So assuming you don't go onto Google, but if you did go onto Google, you wouldn't be taking the first couple of things that came up, because that's really accessible, and it's not necessarily correct. And then, as I mentioned before, the Control F in MS Word will allow you to pick out specific words. Make sure your eyes are positioned at the midpoint of the screen. So if you are on a laptop, hopefully a laptop, not just your phone, raise the laptop up. So you're, like I am now, looking at the midpoint of the screen. So we're all kind of used to, if you're at uni, the laptop's on the table or something and your head's kind of pointed down, which isn't really the best way to read. And then make sure the lighting's correct, and etc., etc. And then you might need glasses. So much reading. These are just some tips. So you can use Immersive Reader in Microsoft Office to customize your display, change background colors, alter spacing between letters and lines. It can also read the text aloud and change the playback speed, reduce distractions. You can also reduce your eye strain by increasing the font size to 14 and by narrowing the window, so narrowing the window you're reading from. So a lot of people read through things and on their phones. So on the phone is really, really difficult to read anything, and I would hope that you wouldn't carry out all of your research on your phones, because you're not likely to get the full benefit of what you're reading. Poor lighting, you can read using a lamp that can shine directly onto the text, because reading in poor light causes eye strain. So, and I've covered the bare necessities of critical reading. So I've gone through the importance of reading, and I have gone through why reading is so valuable and so necessary when it comes to forming a discussion, forming an argument, proving your point, and then getting results from research. And also, effective reading doesn't necessarily mean reading absolutely everything you can get your hands on. It means being really specific and really selective. So I will stop recording here and then continue after.